a moving background. You take all your events and you slap them up onto the blockchain, and it's putting them in order in time. Okay, so that's really, really important. So it's not the same interpretation of blockchain as other people have.
If your system supports that now, you should be able to go and show me that, and you should be able to show me it happening from one account. You know, if you have a DeFi mint on Solana, it quite often crashes because it's a popular account, and there's a collapse back down to sequential threading through the execution engine, and it can't actually do what it says it's going to do, and the resources
has like real-time more transactions. There's a website that is called chainspec.com, and it's like an analytics website, and it ranks all the blockchains by TPS, right? But my question is this: so like Solana, they claim to have, you know, a number of transactions per second, and theoretically,
welcome back to episode 2 of the Proof of Claim podcast. Today, we're laying the absolute foundation. What is a claim? What is validation? And how do we know what we know? I'm your host, Todd Price, and I'm joined with Dan Robles and my co-host, Anil. So Dan is considered by those in the know as the real pioneer of the intersection between blockchain and engineering. With a Bitcoin story that goes back further than mine, Dan is a true OG in the space. He's always maintained a laser focus on the productivity and the usefulness of these systems rather than the speculation that's run rampant in the scene. So welcome, Dan.
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks for the invite.
So I was introduced to Dan's work 3 or 4 years ago through a former colleague of mine. He was a safety process engineer, and we were tasked with developing some material to deliver to the SEC and the central bank in the Philippines. And I didn't really have any idea how to speak to these level of players. And Patrick said, you know, Dan's really laid the foundation for this with his work on measuring risk, turning intangible assets into tangible assets, and speaking a language that's relevant to, you know, investment, finance, engineers, business owners, technologists. So his work as an expert witness really informed my risk assessment framework, and his insights are really why this podcast exists in the first place. So yeah, welcome, Dan, and we're really happy to have you here, and we're hoping that today we can gather some intelligence from you and build out a robust methodology for proving the claims that we're going to, you know, scrutinize on this podcast.
Likewise, get some intelligence together somehow.
So you got into Bitcoin. You're basically saying like right in the beginning, with like, what would you say, like 2010, 2011, or?
Yeah, I never. I always saw Bitcoin as something a little bit different than everybody else did. I didn't. You know, I've been in and out of Bitcoin a little bit. Again, I remember the day I could have bought 1,000 of them, but for pennies.
Wow.
But that didn't happen. So, you know, that's not a discussion we want to even consider, because that just didn't happen. But even at the time, I thought that Bitcoin was a very, very, or at least blockchain in general was a very powerful tool for engineers, like the, you know, the hard space, the boom space engineers, you know, that civil, electrical, mechanical, you know, the people who, you know, in the real world, because it was immutable. This idea of immutability is very common in engineering. You have the immutability of chemical processes. You can't unscramble an egg. You can't return the woods to the forest. So engineering is all built on immutable events. And and then if you're a test engineer, you're concerned with collecting data, and it has to be on a timeline. So it was not only immutable, it was also a clock. So I'm thinking, wow, this is just a great invention. So I got into the invention, but I never really got too wrapped up into coins.
How did you hear about it, and like, what was your first initial kind of like thought around, you know, what it is? Like, how was it presented to you when you first heard about it?
Well, I first heard about it, I thought of it as a gate valve for information. It allows information to go in one direction, but not in the other direction. So I started getting into the math and figuring out how that's done. And, you know, it boils down to, you know, computers are really good at copying stuff, but they're terrible at not copying stuff. So the whole function of a blockchain is to not copy, get a computer to not copy. And that's a formidable task in the computing world. So that's the big problem everybody's, you know, was trying to solve. And it's an important problem to solve. And of course, for the idea of printing money, it's an exceptional problem to solve because you solve the double spend, and that's a very important piece of it.
So I'm curious, in your point of view, would you say that like Bitcoin itself is the big disruptor, or is it more so like blockchain technology as the big disruptor? Like what do you see as sort of the big disruptor?
Well, I saw it as blockchain technology was a big disruptor in general, because I was also, I knew Dan Larimer early on one of his he used to hold these conferences on BitShares and Steam when he was launching those projects. So how you achieved consensus was important, and of course, there's the idea of why would you need $1 million worth of security to secure a $5 glass of orange juice? I mean, there's how much security do you really need? For what you're trying to secure. So there was that ratio involved. So, Bitcoin for very hard problems because it's kind of hard to beat the proof of work.
So in this podcast, we're going to cover a couple of foundational concepts, and I think it would be great for you to kind of break down some of those terms. And so the first one being is the word claim. So in the name we have of our podcast, we have proof of claim. So how would you define a claim? What is a claim in the first place? Not all claims are the same. So curious to know how you would define a claim.
Well, jumping just one notch back in your proof of work idea, proof of work, the idea of proof of actual work always intrigued me. What if you could, provide a token for proof of actual work, as opposed to, so I'm envisioning humans solving a hard puzzle instead of computers competing to solve a hard puzzle. Just sort of a thought like that. And if you look at the fundamental, if you take down economics, strip away the math, strip away the PhDs and the Nobel Prize, all that stuff. And what does it boil down to? Two or more people. Nothing economic happens until two or more people get together and make something useful. That's the very core layer. That's the first principle. And even below that, it all starts with a claim. I make a claim. And that's how the economy starts. When you go to a bank and you want to borrow money, you make a claim that you can pay that money back. And then they look at your records, and if your records can validate that claim, that opens the door for finance to flow. And that's just the example of taking debt, but it happens in relationships. It happens in parents and their kids. And if you boil it all down to the simplest fundamental particle, it's the claim. But that claim can be false, so you need to validate that claim.
So what does a claim represent in the first place?
Okay, so you got to keep it really, really simple, and I'll tell you why. Because when you're dealing with intangibles, you don't have the benefit of scarcity, because intangibles are not scarce; they're abundant. Whereas if you're talking about production, like apples and avocados, they're scarce. The scarcity in intangibles is in time. So how much time do you have to establish this claim? If you make a 3-hour claim, you're not going to find anybody to validate a 3-hour claim because they don't have time or the understanding to really absorb that. So you have to break your claim down into little claims. So that economic of time is the constraint acting on claims and validations, which is important because you do have to have the scarcity in order. When you start building an economy out of it, the idea of scarcity is, except it's not hitting in production, it's hitting in time. And that's very important, again, because your mathematics is using time as a function. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But
so maybe like if we look at work is a function of time, what work is displacement over time. Is that correct in engineering principles?
Well, later on, we're going to apply mathematics to this thing so we can actually, do some calculus with what we're trying to build. But you need to start the clock. Okay, and you got to get the clock, and you need to have a clock there. You need to have your claim is important. But here's something really interesting. If you say, I am a human, so Todd, you say, I am a human, and then I'll say, Todd is a human. There's a claim and there's a validation. But if Todd says Todd is a human, and then I say Todd is a human, we're both making a claim. So the claim is really so the validation is just the claim stated over again. Okay, so it's like the claim is Todd's a human, and you said it, and you're Todd, and I said it, and I'm Dan.
So it's a corroboration of
yes.
the claim being made, and it's someone else attesting to the validity of the claim by, and are they staking their reputation? Are they staking what?
Well, yes, but not yet.
Not yet.
We're going to slowly construct this economy out of dust. Okay, so the work that's being done, the value is created from that conversation that you and I had about you being a human. Okay, again, it's super basic. We're going back to first principles. This could be happening 3,000 years ago in the safari, on the Serengeti, us having this discussion, or it could happen in downtown San Francisco, tomorrow. So, these are things that hold true regardless. So that's where the value is actually created. When we make that claim, and I agree to that claim, and I make that claim. So we both make an equal claim. So instead of saying claim and validation, you have two claims, two identical claims create this asset. Okay. So this is what we're making, that's what we're saying.
And so before, when you said that it's two parties coming together for the economic activity, because if someone's just creating it for themselves, the value's not being validated from someone else. If I'm sitting there, doodling in the sand, that's not valuable to anyone else. So it's just my claim that it's valuable. It's only through the other party coming in and saying, hey, I like what you've done, or that's good, or that's, has value to me, that it makes it be part of a shared reality rather than just the individual's world. Yeah.
And that could include, the bird you just caught, or the corn you just grew, but it could also include the poem you just wrote, or the song you just sang, or the act of parenthood you just imparted on your child. It could be all the intangibles are included in that definition. That's what makes it really right. And the value is created out of that conversation about what is a claim and what is a validation. So it's kind of disingenuous. I can't sit here and define what a claim and validation is, because that is all defined by the two individuals. They're the ones who define that. So
yeah, it's divine.
They're the miners.
Yeah,
they're the mining the data, and in our application, we give you a token for that. We this is where we drop the token on the actual proof of work. So now, if you make a claim about you cured cancer, you got a very, very important claim, then you definitely want to have somebody who is able to and willing and intellectually able to validate that claim in order to make your claim valid. And for that, the payback should be different than if somebody is claiming that they had a ham sandwich for breakfast. It doesn't do much for your reputation. You might find somebody to validate that claim if they're feeling a little bit, playful that day. But, in the economic sense, the gravity of that discussion is now colored by the object that you're making the claim over. And that's for you to decide with your other person. So this is don't take it too literally. This is just formulative ideology of how claims get, because in aggregate it's going to even out. In aggregate, it's going, all the peaks and valleys are going to level out, and then true value will emerge. But you have to have this essential unit in play
that allows it to express the mechanics of it. And then you're saying that as more of it occurs, the granularity and the specificity of the actual way to quantify the claim and the weightings of particular claims against one another will emerge through market forces, essentially.
What's so amazing about this time that we're sitting here today is that we finally have the tools to be able to measure and articulate intangible value. I've been looking at this problem for so long. When it first came out, I got tons of stories. We'll tell them someday. But we thought that email was the big thing that was going to unify engineers. And then we thought social media is going to be the big thing to unify people. And then we said, okay, well, now the .com, they're going to save the world. And then, we went through all the different phases of technology until we came up with the trifecta, which we now call, which is the AI, blockchain, and game theory combined. No single one of those solves the problem, but combined in a very interesting and special way, it does. And that is super, super exciting.
And so the game theory is the incentives, the blockchain is the integrity layer, the AI is the automation and the exponential capability to analyze and automate and action things downstream from it. And the game theory is the why would people want to play? What's going to make them incentivize? Is that?
It's really, really close. What's so exciting about what I do is it's not so much me. It's so important that I say this. It's important that you say this, because we're trying to start a movement here. And it's not going to happen just me blabbering. It's going to happen other people kind of get on. But you're right in the sense that the blockchain serves a function. It's like the clock. Like, remember, 200 years ago, the town square had a big steeple and there was a clock on it and it would ping every hour. That was to synchronize everybody, to get everybody on the same page so they can schedule a meeting, so they can measure the amount of time they spent, combing somebody's, shaving the sheep, or, we're using it as a clock. And then you take all your events and it's like a moving background. You take all your events and you slap them up onto the blockchain, and it's putting them in order in time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's really, really important. So it's not the same interpretation of blockchain as other people have. Now the AI is analysis, because we're going to put all this stuff on a moving backdrop with a time, and then the AI is going to be able to analyze that and arrive at models, predictions, which is super, super exciting. Now, once you have predictions, you can produce probabilities. You can't make a bet without odds. And if you do present odds, people are going to make bets. So what the AI is going to produce are probabilities. It's going to spew out probabilities. And all the entrepreneurs are going to take those probabilities and make bets. And that's going to be what the new economy is built out of. The game theory is analysis tool itself, because it's not gamification. A lot of people think it's like leaderboards and badges and stuff. It's not that. It's game theory is a strict mathematical discipline. And what we're looking for are equilibria. That's the point where one individual cannot improve their position any further, given the activity of the people around them. So there's a very disciplined math to arrive at to use to game theory. That's where your predictions are going to come from, and that's actually where your claims are being made, because you're making a claim, and you're playing a game with that claim. Should you put a trivial claim up? Should you put an important claim up? Should your claim be an hour long? Should it be 15 minutes long? Who's your claimant? Should your claimant be somebody who's smarter than you, or somebody who's your student, or somebody who's your teacher? So all those factors, it's a very, very simple game, but the permutations are infinite once you start pulling in all the different factors and playing the game.
And so the game theory, it's not really the incentives per se. It's more the is the mechanism structured such that if an individual or another person wants to play it by their own rules, is it robust and resilient to, say, an adversarial situation, or is it robust to exploitation? So the game theory is a way to create mechanics in a workflow or something like that can guarantee that if people are acting under a different set of assumptions from you, that it still is proving to reproduce valid outcomes that aren't sort of subject to deterioration from them playing it by a different process?
Well, if the game is designed correctly, we should be able to disincentivize cheating.
Mm-hmm.
And when you disincentivize cheating, you're eliminating an entire layer of punitive measures. Like, you don't have to have a police force, you don't have to have a council, you don't have to cast people out of the community. You don't have to have any. If the game is set up correctly, there should be no incentive to cheat. The incentive should be, in this game that we're building for Boom Space, the incentive is everybody's a capitalist. Everybody's watching out for their own best interest, which is pure capitalism, and it works. But what we're doing is we're disincentivizing cheating, and you're pretty much competing with yourself. to make a transaction record, which is going to be picked up by the LLM, which is the large language model that everybody is creating by aggregating their claims and validations in one place.
And so and by formalizing the process of the claim and the validation, we're creating like a structured data set that is
exactly it's
useful for the AI, the ML to extract.
If we get that right,
particulars.
we got everything. It is so important. People don't see it. Such a simple thing, right? I make a claim, he validates that claim. It's such a simple thing, but if we don't get that right, we cannot measure intangible value into existence.
And we can't sort of safely estimate the risk of hallucinations and things like that, because as my work with some of the AI and that,
oh yeah,
you're asking it to produce something and it just has a tendency to go off the rails. But if you can give it a structured format to respond in and say, here's the input, and you're inputting JSON or you're inputting XML and you've got a schema, then there's a very slim possibility that it starts deviating from that rigid structure. And
right.
Yeah,
well,
it's
the boom space game truncates really quickly so that entrepreneurs are going to solve that problem. Okay, like for example, I'm an entrepreneur too. I have my own company, and we're trying to introduce the idea of engineers in the loop. So if you're using AI to do these massive engineering processes, you have to determine where does an engineer need to be in order to validate that claim, or to validate that AI, or to validate that process, or to verify that something's been done. So you need to have humans in the loop somehow, but there's no business model. There's no business model for humans in the loop. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create that business model. So we need the odds coming off this thing where the AI is going to have a problem. We need to know where's the AI going to hallucinate, and we need to know where's the probability that we're going to have a problem, and that's where we start. That's how we know where to put our engineers. So that's the entrepreneurs will solve all the other problems. If we just set them up with a game where I've used this term before, the game is in fact to game the game. So we're building a game that we want you to try to cheat it. We want you to try to break it because we're going to watch it, and that's going to help us adjust. So we're managing by adjusting an algorithm. We're not managing by slapping down rules and regulations. It's supposed to be as simple and small, as absolutely tiny, as absolutely possible to convert an intangible asset into a tangible asset. That's all we're trying to do. And then the entrepreneurs, we know what entrepreneurs are all about. They're genius. They're brilliant. They're dedicated. They're passionate. We have no doubt that they'll know exactly what to do next.
So this is a process, a method for essentially allowing an engineer or a scientist or someone in a technical capacity that can understand the real world and the things that can go wrong to act as an oracle in a sense, and put an input into an equation so that automated processes can be tied to that.
Well, okay, that's outside the scope of boom space, because that's what the entrepreneur. So I separated myself and say we're building boom space, because if I had boom space, then I can go do this, which is my engineering business, which is outside the construct. But yes, outside the construct, if I know where to put an engineer, for example, if there's a chemical spill in a river, okay, and I can mobilize 18 chemists who know how to measure this one chemical all along that river within an hour, then I can determine where the flows are and where that chemical is going to touch ground and who's it going to hurt and so forth. You can't do that as a corporation. You need to have a meeting, a board. You have to go through accounting and get the lawyers involved. It would take forever. You would never be able to do that. But if I can get the right engineer at the right place at the right time, there's going to be a lot of value added to society because of that. So this is the conversation that the entrepreneurs are having in their brain. If I had this data, what bets could I make, and what games can I win? And you're going to try to cheat the game, and then we're going to be watching, and then we're going to fix whatever needs to be fixed or improve the game as we go along. We're not going to get it right the first run out. It's got to teach us how to be. The game has to teach us how to play the game. That's the metacognition piece of all this.
What does that? What do you mean by metacognition?
Okay, well, in metacognition is like, it's like understanding how you feel about something. So I guess maybe it's part of the epistemology equation. So for example, if I'm at the grocery store and somebody treats me poorly, I'm sitting there reacting to somebody treating me poorly, but the metacognition is you're looking above yourself, watching yourself be mad at the way somebody is treating you. So the metacognition is that you're watching yourself get happy at the way that puppy dog wags its tail. But then you're happy is the cognition part, and then there's the reality. So the metacognition is the thing we're looking at, because that's going to tell us how to design the game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I don't mean to get a little bit too heavy on that, but just keep in mind that the game we're trying to build is super small, super simple. We're going to make it as simple and tiny as possible. That's how we're going to win this thing. So, not complicated. Am I?
Cool. Well, went deep down the rabbit hole in that one. Let me ask you more, again, higher level questions based on some of the words that we've been using here with like claims, validations, proof. What is the difference between validation and proof?
Well, proof is, okay, so you can view the world as deterministic, meaning that there's facts, black and white, on and off, yes, no, or you can look at it probabilistically. Means if you have one validator, then there's probably a 50% likelihood that your claim is true. If you have two validators, 75% likelihood that your claim is true. 30 validators, 99.2% likelihood that your claim is true. Now, there's a price for all those things, because if you're running a risk equation, I might be able to accept 65% likelihood. Maybe it's not that important of a claim, and hey, for a certain price, you pay for certain reliability, certain quality. So, but if it's like if somebody's going to do heart surgery on you, you want a 99.9% likelihood that person is qualified, and you're willing to pay for that. Okay. Otherwise, if you're willing to accept a 65% likelihood that person is qualified to do heart surgery, you're probably not going to pay very much for that service. Or, you see what I'm saying?
Depends on how desperate you are.
So in a probabilistic stamp, this is how we look at it. So the proof is probabilistic. It's, after 99.999%, I mean, that's good enough for NASA. It's probably good enough for most.
Okay, right.
So you can't really get that. We speak in sort of a confidence interval or something. Then you never actually have 100% proof, but you have good enough beyond reasonable doubt, and you.
Yeah, I mean, an asteroid can hit tomorrow, and take out your Bitcoin. I mean, yeah, you can lose it.
Yeah. we need to have some kind of practical framework, and we do that kind of. There's irrational fears and there's rational fears, and a lot of people are motivated by irrational fears because they're irrational because the probability is so slim of them occurring that there's no real need to fret about them, because you should be fretting about the other things that have a higher chance of occurring.
Right.
So we're always doing that kind of I don't know, behavioral economics or something like that to determine what's worth.
But notice your level of fretting is contingent on the percentage of likelihood. There's a correlation between your fear and that likelihood, and that's your risk arbitrage opportunity. If the threat is nowhere near the level of fear, then it's a risk arbitrage opportunity. You can capitalize on that, and that's how it's done in Wall Street all the time.
Mm-hmm. And in what sort of is Wall Street running on claims?
Well, Wall Street is, so Wall Street, there's always going to be okay. So when you're looking at a stock, there's a stock price, and then there's the risk associated with that stock price. There's going to be some ratio that you're pulling off the statistics, whether it's the price per share, or the KPIs, or the debt to asset to debt ratio, or the income to debt ratio. You're taking all these statistics and you're forming a risk profile for that asset. If you happen to know that asset's going to perform has a lower risk than the market thinks it has, then you got an arbitrage opportunity, and you're going to invest in it because you know that's going to perform better. So that's, yeah, that is how Wall Street works. That's how everybody works.
Yeah,
in
so
finance.
the claims are in the sort of the published, the quarterly reports or something like that, and all those
Exactly.
sort
The
of
claim would be in a
assessments.
good, and then you have the regulators. Now, if you take out the regulators, then all bets are off. And that's what, and actually that's something that happened to me in a less developed country. There was this massive trade agreement, and there was like 20-mile stretch of highway which couldn't be insured in the mountains, just little 20-kilometer or 10 kilometers. Nobody would sell insurance for trucks crossing those 20 kilometers. So this $1 billion trade agreement is put on ice cold until you figure out how to insure that 10 kilometers of roadway. So what happened was the government eventually underwrote that insurance product. So you had to have the government come in and guarantee that 10 miles is safe, that 10 kilometers is safe, in order to open up trillions, millions, billions of dollars of commerce. So if you can't identify your risk exposure, if you can't, if you don't have a concrete measure of your risk, then the economies falter. And this is what's so dangerous about what some politicians are doing when they start decimating institutions which regulate the risk or to regulate the likelihood of failure. You're eliminating you're eliminating the probabilities. And if they don't have any bets, if they don't have any odds, they're not going to make bets. That's the way the market works. If the market doesn't have odds, it's not going to bet. It's like an insurance company. If they don't care whether your seatbelts are on, they just want the risk priced correctly. If there's a certain risk and there's not enough information that tells them what the probability of failure is, they're just going to walk away. They're not going to insure something that's unsurable. Unsurable means that you don't know what the risk is. Doesn't mean that it's too risky. It means you just don't know what the risk is. You've heard the expression, bad credit is better than no credit. At least bad credit, you know the probability they're going to default. No credit, you don't. Even though that no credit person could be 10 times the safer than the bad credit person. So these are numbers. These are the numbers we're playing with. Yeah, exactly.
And it's not really about. Well, maybe it is on some level about safety, but it's more about liability, isn't it? So it's who's going to pay if something goes wrong. Not will there be, what's the cost in Fight Club? They say we do the cost of what can go wrong, and measure that against the cost of a recall. And if the cost of the recall's more expensive than paying out all the damages, then we won't do the recall. But if it's cheaper, then we'll do the recall. So
right. So when you push all that stuff away, you're left with the claim and the validation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the point behind that whole conversation, because an asset has to be described in terms of a quality and a quantity. So like, is this 8 ounces of drinking water, or is it 8 ounces of irrigation water? Those are two completely different assets. Okay, so you have to be able to describe the asset, and you need to be able to describe its quality, not the quality like is this good water, bad water, but the qualities of the water. Is it better for cooling a diesel engine, or is it better for sustaining my goldfish? The qualities of the water. Okay, so those are the two components of an asset: a quantity and a quality. You have to describe those two bits explicitly. So that's what the explicitly, that is, that's what the claim and the validation provide us with: the quantity and the quality of that asset, that knowledge asset.
And that's quality, as in like the qualitative sort of the what purpose is it fit for, rather than is it high quality or low quality?
Well, it could be good or bad, like a car that's meant for climbing mountains versus a car that's meant for driving on ice. They're two different assets entirely. But that's the fundamental mechanism we're trying to create with claims and validations. That's why, your podcast is so foundational. If you're investigating that, you're just in a world of definition. You're rewriting the rules when you're playing that game.
Yeah, there's plenty of subject material. It's very rich.
Good call.
So let me ask a clarifying question here. So we've talked about claims, validation, and proofs, and you kind of went into kind of the similarities of validation and proofs. But what would you say is that the differences between the validation and the proof? Are they like stages of the same thing, or?
Well, they're coming from two different people. So they're identical claims. The claim is Todd is a human. Todd makes the claim, Todd is a human. I make the claim, Todd is a human, but they're coming from two different people. So what makes them different is they come from two different people. I've actually, tell you the truth, I've never met Todd ever. He's in Australia and I'm here.
You don't know if he's really a person.
I have no idea. This could be some killer AI shit going on. I don't know. So but I'm a fairly rational individual, and you might say, well, that's enough for me. I'm pretty sure that Todd is a human, given that this other individual has attested that they're human as well. So the difference comes from the individual. Now that individual has a transaction record of all the claims and validations that they've made in the past, whether they're proof of calculus, proof of physical chemistry, proof of microbiology, proof of epistemology, and their transaction record colors their validation of you. And that's the game. You're trying to get your transaction record to be articulated and colored by the people around you. And that's what social fabric's all about. That's the thing that's just getting decimated today in the world. It's the social fabric. Well, you want to be able to build an economy about getting people out to a conference to verify that each other is human. I know it sounds clinical to talk about it that way, but that's essentially where we are.
Right. So I'm just trying to clarify my mind. So the difference between validation and proof, not validation and claim, but validation and proof. What would you say is the main difference between the two?
Okay, I can go back a little bit more. The difference between a claim and validation is the claim always comes before the validation. And this is why blockchain is useful, because I can make a claim and separated by a block comes the validation. So the fact that one came after the other supports the proof.
Right.
If they both came at the same time, you'd be suspect. Or if the claim came before the validation, or if the validation came before the claim, the roles reverse. Okay, so the system, the computer can determine. So that's the first element. The proof comes when the market is satisfied. Like, there's no proof that the airplane is going to reach from LA to New York, from LA to Miami, Florida is going to arrive. I mean, airplanes crash a lot, but the likelihood is below a threshold where people are accepting of that probability. Hence, they prove the claim. They get on the airplane. They ride it to Miami. That's your proof that people will do it. When people stop doing that, your claim is now invalid. It becomes invalid. You see,
so someone could incorrectly validate a claim, and that there's no proof there. It's just someone's they've attempted to validate it. They're based on their expertise. It didn't really mean much because it was like if I went to say validate your claims about structural engineering, I'm not really that equipped, and I might make some incorrect validations there. So it's not proof yet until the market has determined that my capacity to validate a claim is strong as well. And then has several people validated the claim, and of those several people, what was their skill set and their own portfolio of
AI is super good at that math. AI is super good at that math. It's bad at other types of math, but it's good at that math.
So that's a inference probability or something, a confidence interval or something that about the likelihood of it being true. And is this covered under like actuarial?
No, it's actually machine learning. It's the actuarial math is what we're definitely sticking our toe in those waters, because I'm not an actuary, so I can't go too much deeper than that. But actuarial math does cover probability statistics and variance from expectations and so forth. But in the data science theory, you need to have clean data. You need to have your data has to be normalized. If your data is all scattered, then you have to find some element in the data which gives you a probability that line is describing the event that you needed to. But the cleaner the data, the better your probabilities are. So as a engineer, as a test engineer, I would always want to have my data come off in a nice, smooth bell curve, so I can apply nice, easy Six Sigma to it and understand my probabilities based on 6 standard deviations from the mean. I mean, in a perfect world, that's how you want your data to show up. So the process, is making your data easier to collect, make it easier to categorize, and easier to identify bias, and all that stuff you could do before your AI improves the AI magnificently. So you're giving the AI good, clean data, which you can guarantee was generated by a human, not another AI, because when AI starts training from AI, bad things happen. So you want to give the AI a database which is guaranteed to have been produced by humans. That's the key. And so, again, your claims and validations, the way they come out, the way they land on the graph, the way they're verified from humans, that's the essence of what we're trying to accomplish here.
And this is to try and achieve this at scale for global productivity.
Right.
On this show, we've got a proof of claim, we've got a claim and validation process, but we're not using AI or ML, where we're looking at creating a sort of a robust methodology that allows people to come, and we don't want to, some of the claims that people are making, they may require 3 hours to validate because you need to unpack a lot more. And it would be great to, I guess, encourage the claims to be distilled down to an essence that is, you can prove them in isolation in an easier fashion, and then you sort of concatenatively compose a grander claim out of a composition of several claims that are tied together to suggest a capability or something like that.
And that's the game.
Mm-hmm.
That's the game. Is making your claims in the right form. Like, if I claim to be good at physical chemistry, I'm probably good at combustion chemistry too. So you don't actually have to double those claims. If you look at a lot of papers that these scientists write, they reuse a lot of data, and they write a different paper based on the same experiment, and that's all valid. But why claim it over again if you can just reference the prior claim and then you just write the new conclusion? And that could save you a lot of time, and you're going to get peer review in a much different and secure way than if you had to go through the entire process of the academic peer review process and that sort of thing. So you see what I'm saying? How it changes the way things are going to be done.
Yeah, and so you've been talking a lot, I guess, about engineering, but then you're talking now about academic and peer review stuff. So is an academic paper that is essentially a claim, or even sometimes they're a negative claim and sometimes they're a positive claim?
Well, in academic paper, the idea is you have to make a claim, and then the validation is that your claims can be reproduced by another individual of similar background and experience. So that's kind of the litmus test. Can it be reproduced? So then you send that claim out, and other scientists go and they try to reproduce your results. If they can, it's valid. If they can't, it's got questions, or it's not valid, or something along those lines. But it all depends. There's a lot of work that goes into that, and it's extremely slow, and there's a huge backlog, and they got to and you have to throw a paywall in the middle of it all just to get people to pay for it. And is it a prestigious enough journal? Is the validator prestigious enough? Are they knowledgeable in that? There's so many questions. It's very inefficient. But if you can make your claims on a blockchain, and then have it validated you could even choose your validators, or you could have, I guess, to have control over your own data. We're starting to get into identity now. I think you wanted to do that. But in order to control your own data, you have to have some control over your claims, and some control over who validates your claims, and vice versa. So that's where you're going to probably put your controls, or your I don't know. I'm at the point where I don't know a lot of things that are going to happen. Those are, we truncated the application long before you get to the peer review process. So the entrepreneurs are going to figure out how that's going to go. We're just going to give them the odds to do so.
And so this is, we're talking about boom space here is in the we, and we're talking about humanity as well, because we're changing the course of civilization here. So yeah, I guess what we're suggesting here is that this is the fundamental mechanism for economic activity, for a consensus around what is useful economic activity, around what we can take as a validated claim, or take as a given to move the next step of a workflow along, and count on that and take it to market. And so you want to tell me maybe a little bit more about boom spaces? So where does it come from, and where are you at now, and what are you looking at, and what sort of how is a blockchain appearing to offer solutions to you at this point in time?
Okay, well, boom space is the result of many projects over many years, worked on by many people, and I'll leave it at that. We've done experiments inside Boeing. We've done. I used to work at Boeing. In there, we did experiments with. We got a startup called Social Flights, which is like Uber for private jets. We had the international trade agreement between Mexico, Canada, United States. It was another project in my professional world that we worked on, and as a test engineer in a space shuttle. So all these things colored our search for the ability to measure intangible assets. Okay, so now many years later, we've had startups, we've failed startups, we've paid some bills, not too many. It's just what I do, and my social group does. But now we're at a point where we think that if we were to be able to measure intangible assets, we can solve a lot of the problems there are around the constraint of resources, essential human resources that need to be done, like supplying people with education and clean air, clean water, solving the big problems of the world. And because there's never enough money to do it. You ever heard that a million times? Fix the streets. There's never enough money. So there's two ways to create more money. One of them is to print more money. But if you print more money and you keep productivity the same, you have inflation. So what we're doing is we'll keep the same amount of money, but we're going to print more productivity. That means we're going to measure productivity, which is currently invisible. It's currently not being measured, like the intangible assets. And we're going to add those to the economy. And that's going to produce, it's going to be the anti-inflation. It's going to that means it's going to give us the ability to print more money to match this new level of productivity. And then you can now have a stable economy with enough money for everybody. I know it's a wild shot, but we think we can do it. Now you have to ask yourself, what else is there to do? What is the biggest problem today? This instability that we have on the earth. There's $300 trillion of debt that the world owes itself. The world owes itself more money than it exists. Okay, it's ridiculous. I wish I was enumerate. I wish I didn't know what that meant. But how are we going to solve that problem? I mean, 300 trillion, that's in centimeters between Earth and Saturn, in centimeters and back is 300 trillion. That's an enormous number. Where are we going to find the productivity to fill that gap? The only way is to measure intangibles and it all comes down to claims and validation. So this is why I say we're here to alter the course of civilization, because there's not, and everybody should be doing this. Everybody should be thinking about this problem, because that's the one that's going to liberate everybody. Now you've got the money to be creative. You got the resources are now available to be creative and to be artistic and to invent new things, invent a printed circuit board so that you can now usher in the new level of technology. I mean, that's all going to be contingent on our ability to pay for science and engineering to just get on with it and solve the problems in the order that they need to be solved. So that's my on the standing on the soapbox there.
Well, I was speaking to Gregory Sandstrom, and we were trying to come to a mutual understanding around boom space, because it is somewhat ephemeral what we're talking about. We're not used to these terms, and we kind of crystallized on is, would you say it's a valid description to say that boom space could provide innovation as a service or productivity as a service, like other platforms provide software as a service or something? If you can come in and use the boom space platform to find someone with validated claims, with professional expertise, with something that substantiates their word, and then you can deploy them almost immediately, that's going to be the recipe for getting productivity gains, isn't it? Finding the right person for the right job.
Oh, absolutely. But remember at the very beginning of the seminar, I was trying to tell you that it's everything that we know already. So this is why the words I use sound familiar to you, but you're just hearing them in a different order than what you're usually used to hearing. So my job is to speak this language and hope that everybody can eventually start thinking a little bit different every day. Because once you see what I see, you can't not see it. Okay. Mm-hmm. But just every day, people think a little bit different about what productivity is. And its answer to your second part is no, boom space can't do it, but entrepreneurs will. Okay, so entrepreneurs are going to figure out what needs to be done next. And if they have, and if they can find the right person at the right place at the right time, it doesn't have to be engineers. I mean, engineers aren't necessarily known for empathy, but empathy is an intangible asset that's going to be measured. It can now be measured on boom space. So
this is the backbone. You've said it's the graph neural network that allows the entrepreneurs to meaningfully identify the candidate to deploy in a context.
Yeah, we're organized in silos right now, silos and hierarchies. We have to get rid of all those silos and hierarchies and organize ourselves as a neural network architecture, because that's how AI is organized. And if you can do that, then they can both integrate. But until then, you're going to have a big collision between hierarchy and graph neural network, and the math isn't robust enough to solve that problem, I don't think. But if you can get them both in the same format, then you can get the humans to integrate with AI. That's when you start winning the game.
Interesting. There's so much possibility, isn't there? Like when
it's amazing. I mean, and like I was listening to your podcast yesterday, and you guys are thinking big, like $1 trillion popping from BSV to BS, from one Bitcoin to another.
BTC to
we're so close to solving this problem, and we can solve it on the BSV network, that $1 trillion is small. We're talking $300 trillion. Now that's a real number.
That's the baseline. That's what we've got to fix to get accurate accounting, and then we move forward from there. And then it's, we've got to get ourselves out of that debt structure,
right?
And then
if there's a calamity, and the humans are choice with, okay, I've got two digital tokens. One represents nothing, and one represents human productivity. Which one are you going to call money? The one that represents human productivity. So, I mean, why are you arguing over who's Satoshi when you can just go and create a token which represents human productivity better, and, the game over? Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off like that.
No, that's all right. And that's going to require scalability, isn't it?
We all know it's going to require people, all of us, to get together. We have to build a movement. This isn't for Joe Entrepreneur in their basement to whip out this app. It's going to need to be a movement. It's going to need people coming around to an ideal, something huge, something massive, and then pulling it off. What I can tell you is it's easy. It's nowhere near as difficult as the difficult problems that face us.
It's just structuring the information correctly at the beginning, and then feeding it to our machines, and
using the blockchain like a data logger and like a synchronization clock, using AI like an analysis tool, using game theory as a governance, and you've got all the components of an economy right there. And tokens will be your your money. It'll literally be your money. And you can do this concurrent with the way the world is working now. It's not like you have to rip down or do scorched earth on what's happening now. You can build a parallel to the current economy and just kind of float along. And as this one starts decaying, this one starts picking up. It's easy peasy, and you're out of trouble faster than you know it. And nobody has to lose their money, and no rich guy has to lose their yacht. I mean, we're not about sticking it to the man. I mean, that's not what this is about. It's just logical economics.
I think of the scene in Pirates of the Caribbean where the ship's just sinking more and more, and he's just up the top of the mast, and it comes right in, and he just steps off the top of the mast onto the deck and walks off, and then the ship just goes under it. That's what I'm kind of aiming for, rather than trying to burn it all down. You go just a graceful departure from a sinking ship, and
right, yeah, and everybody can keep their guns. I mean, it's not a political thing. If it weren't worth doing, I wouldn't be doing this. So that's my motivation.
What tips do you have as we're going forward with this? And we're not using AI and ML as with this proof of claim podcast. And the idea is I want to help executives, decision makers, startups to make informed decisions in here. I want to hold people to account for the claims that they're making through marketing, through capabilities, and so that someone who wants to attract investment or commit investment to a project can have a better understanding of what can go wrong, where they're going to likely waste money. But we're doing it in an analog way, and we're doing it through discussion and conversation and just giving people an opportunity to put that forward. But do you have any suggestions for us to?
Well, what could be really fun?
Yeah.
What could be really fun is incorporate a time function. Okay. So what I mean by that is rate of claims, the velocity of rate of claims being made, the acceleration of, treat it like a physical constant, like momentum. You know how you have impact momentum, distance. That way you could say, here's a claim and here's a validation. What's the rate? And here's a bunch of claims and different validations. What's the rate of change of these claims and these validations with respect to time? Now, what's the rate of change of that rate of change with respect to time? So if you start looking at them moving, then as a dynamic, then that would open up a huge conversation about society, social values, social currency, intellectual capital, social capital, all arise from that combination of claims and validations moving.
And so would you, let's say, for example, in a blockchain context, a platform is saying we can do 500 TPS, and then how long before their next claim transforms to we can do 1,000 TPS or we can do 2,000? So you're saying, oh, look, they've made a claim, but their claim's not changing, it's completely static. Whereas if another platform is saying, okay, we can do 500, we can do 1,000, we can do 20,000, we can do 100,000, that's a rate of change of a claim over time, and that's demonstrating. That's an easy statistic to pull. Or what you do is you tell them, okay, you say that your blockchain can do this speed, make a claim on the blockchain, and then set it out there. Who's going to validate this claim? If nobody validates the claim, that's a fake news. That's a lie. It's a non-valid claim. Mm-hmm.
It's not validated.
Unsubstantiated.
Right. So if you say something that sounds a little bit squirrely, put it on the blockchain. Let's see if anybody in the world is going to step up and validate that claim. Go ahead. And then watch what happens. And you'll see a lot of people just fall out of the mix because they know that what they're saying can't be. They're saying it for marketing reasons. They're saying it for political reasons. They're saying it for a million reasons except the real reason. So if you've got a tool like the blockchain where it's immutable, it's there forever, and you go down as history as being a person who issued a false claim or an unvalidated claim, or your transaction record has a bunch of unvalidated claims on it, that's going to color every transaction you made. And since it took you 10 years to create that transaction record, it's very, very expensive to have an unvalidated claim on your transaction record. So yeah, do that. Get people to put it on the blockchain. Let's see.
I thought as even something publishing, we've got an open invite to anyone who wants to come on here and substantiate their claims, and we invite people on. And similar to the idea of a canary in the coal mine, or the warrant canary that websites publish that says, if you're under an NDA, you can't disclose that you've been subpoenaed or something. So they have a canary that sits on their website, and they take the canary down, and that says, "Oh, we said we couldn't disclose that we're under an NDA, but we can take away this thing that says we're not under an NDA." And so it's a sort of a way of signaling. And if we invite people onto the show and then they don't want to come on and substantiate their claims, it's a type of signaling itself.
They're pumping their token. They're on a pump and dump tour,
And how to what extent do you think that is the case in blockchain at large? Like, do you see it as primarily speculative, or do you see there being?
Well, everybody says the blockchain is okay. This is a token that's going to change the world. Remember Haktua girl? She had the token that's going to change the way the print into people do internet. I mean, every token has that marketing statement, and you have to ask them, how exactly is that going to happen? Or even what productivity does back Bitcoin? Well, I just told you everything you can do with Bitcoin that you can't do without Bitcoin is the value of Bitcoin. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's valuable. I mean, that's important. Bitcoin can do some really important things. $1 trillion worth? I don't know. But it does. It's backed by productivity. But who's backed by the better productivity? Who's backed by the most productivity? Who's backed by the productivity that you can control, that you can earn, you can sell, you can capitalize on? That's the token that's going to win.
And that functionality, the utility that can't be done on anything else, is the capacity to underwrite or have this log layer, this clock to the claims and validation process. And it's the interoperability of the data through like the triple entry accounting paradigm.
Or interoperability with the existing financial system. For example, debt is a promise against future productivity. So I'm going to promise you my future productivity if you give me the money today. Well, innovation is the same thing. Innovation is a promise that you're going to create future productivity. So you ask the VC for money today. But if you have two assets backed by the same underwriting asset, they should be convertible. So you should be able to convert an innovation token backed by a token backed by innovation for a token backed by the dollar, because they're both representing future productivity. You have two assets with the same underlying. And those are sort of the magical things that can happen with finance if the data is in the right format. If we were to organize ourselves in the right way, then we can integrate seamlessly with existing institutions as a new currency, or as a complementary currency. Is that too much?
No, I've got an appetite for that. But what do you think, Anil?
I think it's a lot. I'm still trying to think about the whole proof and validation. You were talking about, okay, so let me bring it back to, you brought up a blockchain. Let's look at, like, let's say Solana, for example. I was thinking about, they claim Solana or ICP is one that claims to have the fastest number of, let's just use Solana, for example. It's very popular, way more popular than ICP, but apparently ICP has like real-time more transactions. There's a website that is called chainspec.com, and it's like an analytics website, and it ranks all the blockchains by TPS, right?
Mm-hmm.
But my question is this: so like Solana, they claim to have a number of transactions per second, and theoretically they claim to have a theoretically high peak of number of transactions. I think it might be 1 million, or maybe it's only 200,000. I could even pull up the website right now. But so my question is this: like, there have been, okay, so going back to the fundamentals of what we've been talking about with claims and validations, they claim to be doing so many transactions per second currently right now. Let's just call it 1,000 transactions per second. They claim this real time is happening right now. That's their claim. But I've heard also that like 50% or even something like 90% of the transactions, maybe the number is not correct, but there's a large portion of those transactions that are not actual like transactions. They're more like validations. Could you maybe explain that, Todd, if you understand that a little bit better? But like the question I'm saying is, like, someone can make a claim, but how do we know that that claim is a clean claim? I don't even know the best way to say this, but
you have to have a clean test. Somebody's got to design a clean test, an unbiased test. And until you do that, then it's something that maybe everybody can run against. One thing like XRP, for example, XRP, there's a lot of XRP. So the supply of XRP is really huge, and that's what's supposed to be holding down the price of XRP. But it's also a very useful token. It's used for a lot of different remittances, a lot of different transactions. It's a really fast, useful token. So that's what's pumping it up.
Right.
Okay. And it's used by major institutions, and it's convenient. They made it really easy. So you could see where there's pressure pushing that up. I could at least envision it, even though the market may think otherwise. But Solana, I haven't really looked at it too much to know what it does, but it's got to have some trick up its sleeve. Otherwise, you know, it's got like Dogecoin is Doge is just a joke coin. I mean,
I think the mechanism what Solana does is because it's an account-based system, and you need to have sequential processing on the same account. So you're limited by that the maximum throughput you can do on a single account. But Solana says, oh well, we make declarations as to what accounts it's going to be touching, so that we know that we can process these in independently of one another, because they're not multiple transactions coming from the same account. So I think a bunch of those other transactions are the communication that occurs to make the attestations that, oh, we're not touching the same account, we're doing this and that, and it almost like batches chunks of the received transactions and summarizes them in a way, yeah, these are all independent of one another, so validate them. So I think there is a lot of overhead in the transactional activity that's simply these sort of intra-block communications of one another about how transactions can be ordered and validated in series or in parallel, because of that fundamental like architectural constraint with the account-based sequential threading.
So that's what I'm getting at, is that so my question is this: their claim is 1,000 transactions per second real time today, but their definition of a transaction, this is what I'm trying to ask, is like it's not necessarily the same as what you would typically define a transaction on any other blockchain. So how is it that they can claim something that, there's like a sleight of hand here happening, where like they kind of have inflated numbers in a way, because their definition of a transaction is not necessarily the same as another blockchain would potentially, consider a transaction. Am I explaining that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I would guess that the approach they would take is to make a claim on a blockchain, and here's my claim or my series of claims, and then who's going to validate this?
I think this is where the trivium comes in useful as well, because we actually, what is a transaction and what are you actually stating? So let's flesh this out, because at the moment it takes a long time to invalidate that claim, because there's these presuppositions and suggestions that all things are equivalent in transactions.
Right.
But if you look and you define a better test, show me 110,000 transactions per second coming from the same account.
Well, there's your time function. How much time will it take for somebody to build a test that everybody agrees to? So if it takes a long time, that's sort of boogering on your value prop. If it takes a long time to prove that your claim is validated, I mean, That's why the time function is important, because the amount of time that passes between two events tells you a lot about the event.
Mm.
So we don't have to answer the question now, but you're measuring, the clock is ticking.
Yeah.
And you're, and that's the game.
And it should be, if your system supports that now, you should be able to go and show me that, and you should be able to show me it happening from one account. If you have a DeFi mint on Solana, it quite often crashes because it's a popular account, and there's a collapse back down to sequential threading through the execution engine, and it can't actually do what it says it's going to do, and the resources get exhausted, and it goes, oh, look, fall over, we need to reset. But that was what I've identified in the Chinese Academy of ICT. They've got a testing framework that they validate blockchain builds through, but it's completely idealized conditions. And they say, oh, they can all do 100,000 TPS. But you look in production and it's all around 150 TPS is the maximum they've achieved, because the testing was explicitly designed, or cleverly defined, where it never touched the same accounts. And so you can, in theory, parallelize it, because, okay, let's create 100,000 accounts. Can these all spend at once when they're all separate? They've got no funding that's shared. Yeah, they're all spending at once. Great. But in reality, a prominent social media network arises and it's got one account, or an exchange arises, or a DeFi mint, or a particular smart contract, and everyone's going to use it. So the whole thing collapses back down to being sequentially threaded. And so it gets worse the more popular particular accounts.
We'll start the clock and let the games begin. I mean, that's what the boom space is all about. So
so they come here, they make their claims, and then we give them a period. Who can come back and validate their claims the quickest.
Right. So your podcast could be the claim maker. You make the claim here, enter the claim real time on a blockchain, and
you come back. You got 3 months to follow up.
Start the clock.
Come back in. Can you wrangle your architects, your designers, your developers to show us 1 million TPS, or can you show us production capabilities at this level? I
always thought, envisioned like fantasy football or fantasy baseball, where you have a card and all the stats are on the back of the card, and you can actually, even you're not having the real players, but you form teams from these cards and the statistics are on the back. It's like $1 billion industry, and people form leagues. Imagine if they had like fantasy coding, where certain coders with certain validations on their background, they get together and everybody makes bets on who can solve the problem. I mean, wouldn't that be a fun game?
It'd be fun and it'd be valuable.
Fantasy engineer, fantasy coder, and you can become a millionaire being part of this game.
Yeah, and if they do football manager, and you're building up an asset through the fantasy game or something. But if you're running as an entrepreneur and you're running a pool where you keep some people on a retainer, or you find them in there and you're like fractionally leasing out contractors to go and solve a problem for a particular, or provide a solution for a particular problem. That's it'd be a brilliant way for the world to operate, where you just worked on the things that you were best suited to at that point in time, deployed instantly.
You're happiest doing.
Yeah.
The intrinsic value is now worth something. Anyway.
I think that time constraint's super useful for us. Giving them the opportunity to come and make a claim, and giving them a period of time to go and substantiate the claim. You can bring it onto the show, discuss it, use words to offer your proof. Certain people can I'm sure will be able to provide proof immediately of their capabilities, and you go, well, that's a validated claim.
So that could be, the whole show could be about that.
So I'm
bring your claims.
I actually just pulled up the website. So it's called chainspect.app. That's the analytics site. And I actually just pulled up the little question mark on TPS, the metric TPS, to see how they define it. And they actually clarify what I was asking. They're only counting, they only count transactions with economic value that's included in the transaction. And that's what I basically was wanting to know. Are they only including that, or are they including things like system transactions, transactions needed for consensus, inner transactions that are not counted. They say internal and inner transactions are not counted as additional transactions. So they actually clarify in the metrics. So that's interesting. That's good. That's really good. Now it's a matter of do we trust the the aggregator of this the analytics platform itself, right? ChainSpec in itself. How do they validate? How do they validate the claim?
Well, maybe
they have their lawyers look at it first.
Yeah.
Maybe they'd be an interesting guest to get on and talk about how they measure these things, and what's the integrity like on that deeper layer that sort of suggests that it can put these statistics up there and people can make use of them.
Yeah, I wonder if they just go off of the block explorer that is available, just like public available block explorers.
Well, I don't think they would say with pre-consensus transactions and such. So there must be some level of
That's right.
intelligence there that's distinguished between those. And I don't know how they have empowered themselves enough to be able to make those distinctions. It'd be interesting to speak to the
it would be
individual or whoever's in charge of that. Yeah.
We should reach out and then let it be known that we reached out to ChainSpec.
I'm telling you, this is what entrepreneurs do. You're doing exactly what millions and millions of entrepreneurs will do once they see what we see.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Anyway, that's the metacognition part.
Cool. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today, and I feel like we've sort of just paused at a nice period here. I think it's been about an hour and a half. So maybe we can wrap that up at this stage, and we'd love to get you on again, Dan, and maybe you can sort of be our little our mentor that keeps an eye on how we're going and fine tunes the dials.
That'll be excellent. I would enjoy that.
Support in our
I would enjoy that
capabilities. How, if people want to learn more about your work, Dan, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you, to reach out, to connect?
Well, I'm pretty notorious on. You Google my name and you'll find Daniel Robles PE, or Co-Engineers is my engineering company. Boomspace.ai is our startup. We're looking for. You want to help us with that? That would be really, really sweet.
Who are you looking for?
Help us build this application.
Yeah,
help us build it.
So people with technical skills.
Yeah, technical skills. Yeah, it's more like it's not like we have a job for you. It's like bring what you got, and we'll find a place for it. So it's that's more like if you're marketing and you know how to do websites, whatever you know how to do, that's just the nature of what we're doing. Is that it's more about what your intrinsic value is, not what your economic value is. I guess I don't know. It's hard to explain, but you'll know it when you see it. That's kind of come help us build this thing.
Yeah, well, I reached out to you, and then it's been amazing. Just
good things happen.
Semi-regular cadence, and we I've learned a lot, and then I've also met some really incredible people, and then it's also been a vehicle where I extend an invite to other people and say, hey, are you interested in this? And they say absolutely. So it seems to be a very common ground that we all can get behind, of bringing more productivity, more innovation, a greater level of integrity to the marketing world. And
I hope we got it right, because there's not a whole lot of time. We got to build this thing. I'm sorry to tell you.
The clock's ticking soon. The clock's ticking, hey?
Clock's ticking.
So we hope you've enjoyed this episode. We're looking at still a couple more of these foundational episodes. So Dan's done a lot of work here, but I would like to get some people on to discuss the idea of gaming, the game theory or gamification, and sort of turning this into a process that's fun, that people want to do, that has that's engaging. And we need to understand the nature of identity. So I'm hoping to get some experts on there that can discuss what identity is, how people make identity, because there are a lot of similarities here. And when you look at Reid Sayi and Griggs' work on the identity cycle, identity is really the capacity of other people to validate your claims about yourself, rather than it is relying on a silo of birth certificate numbers or passport numbers or something like that. So we've still got a few of these foundational episodes to undertake before we can really get into dissecting, the claims in the blockchain space. But we hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we hope you continue to tune in and join us as we flesh this process out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, Anil. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.